Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today this is what we're going to be painting, and it's a 16 by 20 canvas. I'm going to be using the following colors and I'm just going to apply them directly onto the canvas. We've got neon yellow warm, we've got some neon pink, and I'm going to be using a large blending brush. I'm also going to add a little bit of neon yellow and some of my ultramarine blue. Just using a little palette knife here to just apply some of that on. And I'll also be using a little bit of white. So I'll take another palette knife. This is a really fun way to approach your paintings if you guys are wanting to change things up and tired of following reference photos. This is really fun. I just recommend picking all the colors that you love, all your favorite ones, and putting them right onto the canvas and then blending them around, creating different brush strokes. But here I'm just going to start blending across the center of the canvas, and I'm going to slightly blend one color into the next and so on, creating little scoops, and slowly start from the corner with the blue, picking up a little bit of that white, and really just letting all those colors mix together, and leaving it really patchy in some areas as well. So I have a lot of different tones, lights and shadows going on. And even when the blue is mixing with both of the yellows and the pink, it takes a little bit of a smoky gray tone, or even a little bit on the brown side. I don't mind, because it's really important to have some of those earth tones in a painting, especially when you're using a lot of bright vivid colors like this. So it makes for a really nice balance to have a few earth tones in there. I'm going to create a water effect, so I'm working on the reflection right now, going back and forth, long sweeping brush strokes, and then up and down in short little flicks, and really working that paint out of my brush towards the horizon. Now I'm taking more white and I'm going to work on making everything a little bit more blended in the sky. I will be leaving one part of the sky a little bit rougher looking and more patchy, and that's going to be the center area where I have the yellow and the oranges meeting the pink. So I'm just going to pull and scoop off some of the paint here and move it around. All the paint is still wet here on my canvas, so I can have fun blending it around like you would with oil paint. And the trick is with this to have a little bit of water on your brush and work quickly. Also keep your studio a little bit on the cool side temperature wise. I'm going to take those warm bright colors again and add them right down in the middle of the water so that it's reflecting the sun above and that beautiful sunset. I'm going to apply them in both directions, the brush stroke straight down, a short little flick, and then I'm going to go across, so back and forth, sliding my brush side to side, creating those little ripples, leaving some lines in between of that darker blue. Okay, so I've got a little Filbert brush here, and I'm just going to take my warm yellow and my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to blend the two together. I'll get a dark green color, and this will be the first base. And I'm just going to make a triangle, a very skinny triangle down the center. So it's going to get narrower and narrower where we're going to have our little house, and then gradually get wider towards us in the foreground or the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to pull my brush back and forth and create lots of lines, and this way it's going to look like planks of wood. I've got some burnt sienna now that I'm going to add to that color, and I'm going to start adding a little island here in the distance. I'm going to pull and flick as well to create an instant forest and tree area here, and just tap tap tap, creating little trees just to surround our house with. And I think this is a really fun painting to create. You could have any kind of trees you want for your island. You can paint your house any color that you want, add more flowers, more windows, change it up, really make it your own. And I'm going to add a little bit of neon yellow to my palette. And I'm going to blend that up with the burnt sienna and the other green color that I made earlier. And I'm going to add this to my trees, so a little highlight here, and it's going to dry a little bit darker, more towards like a deep green. Now I've got some black, burnt sienna, and a number 4 flat brush. I'm going to mix the two colors together and start my little cabin here. So like a triangle top and then a little square underneath. I'm going to join them and just fill that in with those same colors. I'll be adding some stripes to give it a log house look, and it could also be siding as well, whatever you want your house to be like. And I'm going to pull those colors back and forth, side to side with the same brush, building up the wood on my little dock area here. I'm going to make them slightly wider and longer here in the foreground, and that's going to help to create that perspective. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white and start adding a highlight inside this dock right at the base of the house. There's going to be some light coming from inside the house. We'll add lights in the windows, and as well we've got that sunset, so there's light coming from the sky and inside that little house. I will be adding more highlights to the dock later on as the paint layers dry, but for now I'm going to come in on either side and add a shadow with my black, and then we'll start working on the posts. So we're going to make them smaller and closer together for distance, and then leave bigger gaps and make them larger towards us in the foreground. Once I have the basic shape that I want, I'm going to join them all and make it look like there's rope, and I'll create little scoops, thin scoops, just with the same paint and brush. I've got a little liner brush now, my ultramarine blue, and some titanium white. I'm going to go ahead and squiggle in and blend with my finger a little bit of smoke coming out of the chimney. I'll add a little highlight on the posts and the rope as well. And I'm also going to start my little lanterns. I thought it would be fun to have lights on top of each of the posts, so I'm going to do a light sort of a circle blob on top of each one of them, and remember that they're going to be bigger like everything else here in the foreground, and then get smaller and smaller towards our house. It's time to come in with a little bit of neon yellow and a little bit of white with a liner brush, and I'm going to add some light in our windows. We'll add some windows here, so just little lines and dabs and dots because it's far away and we're not going to see a ton of detail, but just doing a few little shapes like this can make a big difference. I'll also apply the same color down below on our dock for some highlights. I'm pulling side to side and then straight forward. So this really gives you that reflective look. So I thought it would be fun to come in with a bit of white, burnt sienna, and that yellow, and carefully add some lines, not measuring anything and not too concerned about making everything perfectly spaced out. I think it adds more character this way if certain things are a little bit crooked or lopsided. And then I'm going to add some more highlights here to the rope and the posts, and then we'll start working on the next step of this painting. Soften the lights on our posts using a little short round brush. I'm not using any water at all, just a little bit of paint, and I'm going to dab and scumble around, sort of working my way out to a dry brush, creating that glow around each of the lanterns. Now, I accidentally pick up a little bit of brown on this one, so I'm going to clean that up after, just go over with a little bit more white. And then a little bit more orange or yellow. I keep calling it orange, but it really does look like orange, but it's actually neon yellow warm that I'm using. I'm going to do a thin dry brush over the island back there as well. I think it kind of looks like fog, and I like that look. I'm slowly going to start to add more warmth to this painting, starting with the lights. So I'm adding that neon yellow warm, full strength, to the lights. I'm going to add it to the house, to the boardwalk again, and maybe even a little bit up in the sky. After softening that yellow up, I'm going to go right over to my black, and I'm going to start working on my little lanterns. So I'm going to do a flat base of black right on the bottom, and then 2 lines that come in narrower slightly at the bottom of the lantern on each side. Then I'm going to go across the top with a line that overhangs on each side, so it goes just past, a little bit wider on either side, and then I'm just going to simply add a little triangle on the top. So nothing too complicated or over detailed. You guys can all follow this along, and you can add more detail or less even if you want. I'm going to add a shadow and a little bit more color to some of these posts by adding more black and a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to use a smaller brush to finish the rest of the lanterns as they get closer to the house. I'm going to use a smaller brush. It'll be a lot easier to add those black details on the lamps or the lanterns with a smaller brush. Obviously, it would be too difficult to try to do that with a larger brush. After finishing off those details with a clean brush, little Filbert one here, I've got my neon pink, titanium white, and I'm going to make a really light bubblegum color and add a few more details in the sky. And just long sweeping scoops, sometimes using more pink, sometimes using a little bit more white. Okay, for the next step, I'm going to be using my 1-inch oval mop brush, neon yellow cool, and a little bit of black, and just a tiny bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to start working on the grassy areas here, in and around the water. Just light little taps, and then a little scumble. So tapping and then pulling softly to blend out the bottom of each one. And then I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. Sometimes I'm going to pick up a little bit more black so I can create some depth and make it look 3D. So you want to have enough light and shadow going on in your painting so it doesn't look flat. So you can't have everything the same tone in a painting. It makes a big difference to have some highlights and some shadows. Now I'm just going to finish off the bottom here with a little bit of my warm colors. I've got some yellow in there, both yellows, and a little bit of burnt sienna, even a little bit of that pink, just to add some warmer areas, maybe for some sand or some rocks, maybe even a few flowers down there. I'll go back to that in a minute, but I want to come in with a big tall tree here on either side. So I'm going to start here on the far right, and I'm going to pull down and wiggle and press a little bit harder as I get down towards the bottom of the canvas where that tree is going to be the biggest at the base. And there's a few different brushes you could use for this. You can use a Filbert brush, a round brush, and a flat brush. I'm going to pull and wiggle some branches off of either side of the tree, and then I'm going to be coming in with some smaller branches. I'll be using a little liner brush for that. And I'll also be coming in with accents of green and yellow. I've got a nice olive green that I like to use in combination with black and my neon yellow for my foliage and my bushes and paintings. It's a really nice earthy green, and I would recommend staying towards those greens other than going for a phthalo or a viridian green. So here it is right here, the one I'm talking about, light olive green. If you don't have it, it's like a green gold, and you can make green gold by taking cadmium yellow and black. I'm going to start coming in and tapping all my leaves and foliage. This is one of the parts of the paintings that I enjoy most. I love using these mop brushes, and I love the stipple and tapping effect in creating landscapes. It's really satisfying, especially when you have a brush that you love. And this one, again, it's a 1-inch oval mop by Princeton, so I highly recommend them. You can find them at Michael's as well as online and many fine art stores. I'm going to tap a little bit down below the base of the tree. I always like to have a little bit of foliage or moss or ivy growing up the tree, and then I pull and flick to create hanging moss, a drippy moss effect, and vines on my trees as well. So you'll see me changing it up. My brush stroke changes up here and there from tapping to pulling and flicking. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'm going to be using my large stipple mop brush that I got many years ago at Michael's. Unfortunately, they discontinued them, but this one has lasted me a really long time. But you can use any stipple brush that you want. I have another one that I like to use. It's a number 10 by Colorantic, in case you guys are looking for one. And I'm going to just do the same brush techniques as I did over on the right side. So stipple, tapping, and then pulling and flicking for that hanging moss. I'm going to go back over to the right side now and fill in these branches with more of my light olive green using the same brush. I want my tree to be fuller, so I have lots of room to play around with. Maybe add treehouse, some hanging lights, whatever I decide to add. And I've got a long liner brush here that I'm going to be using to make the branches and the tree trunk with over here. I just took a little bit of blue, burnt sienna, anything on my palette that I know will make a really dark color and a good base for my tree trunk and branches. So when using the liner brush, it's important to know that you're going to need a lot of water with it to help the paint flow out of there. And be very light and gentle with the amount of pressure that you're applying to create those flowing and natural looking branches. Okay, these trees are just about done, but I want to come over and make a light ultramarine blue by taking some white along with my blue, mixing it up with my liner brush, and just adding a little bit of a frosty highlight to some of these lanterns here. They're mostly going to show up, the ones here in the foreground. I won't bother adding it to every single lantern, but this is a really nice accent color for the trim and roof line on your house, especially if it's a cool morning time of day that you're painting, or even at dusk or evening. It's just a really, really nice color to add to a painting for shadows and midtones. I'll add a little bit to these posts as well before I start my next step. I'm using one of my round brushes now, and I'm just going to add a little bit of color, a little bit of neon pink and white lines in the water. I want to create more ripples and just bring some more life to the water. So reflecting more of the colors that are above in the sky and playing up on the saturation a little bit. This way, when I add the reflective glow from the lights, they'll show up a little bit better. And I'm just going to come in and exaggerate the moss a little bit more. So I'm going to push and tap and then create short little flicks for brush strokes. So we'll bring some moss down and have it hanging down lower. This is going to help to create more atmosphere and ambiance in the painting. So you can use a round brush for lots of things. You can use it for creating branches like I'm doing here, using the very tip of the brush, wiggling gently around. And then you can also turn it on its side and just drag and flick off some of the paint. So it's a multi-purpose brush. I actually don't have enough of these in my collection. I need to get a few more sizes, but I think I've only got two. They're really, really great brushes and underused, I think. Not too many people have enough of them and take advantage of them. So I'm just going to keep going here with my moss and my branches and bring them into the center meeting and joining right in the very middle, at the top of the canvas. Kind of creates a nice frame that helps to draw our eyes into the center, and the focal point being our little boardwalk leading out to our private little island where we have our little house there. Okay, now adding a little bit of my yellows, white, and just a tiny bit of burnt sienna, I'm going to turn my brush flat on its side and just lightly drag and pull, just for a little bit of texture and highlights on the tree trunk. And then I'm going to follow in the center here and build up some more highlights on my little boardwalk. With a clean Filbert brush, and it's pretty much dry, it's just a little bit damp, I've got some white, titanium white, and I'm going to create a foggy mist here in the background just to soften up the sky a little bit more. So I have so much of the same green going on around this painting that I want to change the temperature up a little bit in the foreground. So I'm taking straight neon yellow cool, and I'm going to apply a filter over top of the dry paint underneath. So this is going to change the temperature up, like I said, and it's going to be a little bit more exciting and stand out from all the other greens. So it's important to have a few different temperatures going on in your paintings to make it really interesting. So you could have warm temperatures and cool temperatures, like you would have highlights and shadows in your paintings. It's also something really important and not talked about enough and mentioned in tutorials. So it looks like I'm adding it everywhere, but I'm just adding a little bit of it here and there, but mostly in the foreground and the base of the trees. All right, what would one of my paintings be without a staircase, right? Especially one of my fantasy paintings. So I decided this was the perfect spot right over here on the far right. I'm just going to pull little lines a little bit wider here in the foreground to give us that perspective, and then they're going to get a little bit shorter and wrap around the tree. I'll add a highlight of my light olive green, so black for the lines, the shadows, and light green for those highlights. Just gonna detail using black my roof line and the side of my house, as well as some of the lanterns. Okay, now for our next step, I'm going to use my short little round brush here with a little bit of warm yellow and white, and I'm going to push, twist, and turn, creating all the little lights for my trees. Some larger, some smaller, and I'm not thinking too much about the placement. I'm kind of just going with a flow and kind of making it look a little off-centered and sporadic so it looks more fun and whimsical. I'm going to go back in and dot and dab the center of each of them with bright titanium white. I'll be doing the same thing over on the right side, and I'm also going to create a little reflection down in the water that I think is really, really pretty, and personally my favorite part of this painting that I think brought it all together. It gives it a magical look. When the lights are dry, I'm going to go around them with a dry brush of white and a bit of yellow and create a glow or a haze around each of them. I'm using water, my liner brush, light ultramarine blue with a little bit of black and burnt sienna, pretty much any dark color that you can make that will stand out. And I'm going to paint the string for the lights like I would branches, only make them a little bit flowier and curvier. And I'm just outlining my little window on my tree there with a bit of black, and then back over to my round brush. The lanterns, everything is dry here in the foreground, and I'm just taking a little bit of white and a little bit of my warm yellow, and I'm just going to create some fog and mist sporadically around the edges and in between some of those lanterns. I'm going to do the same sort of on the grassy areas, just a little bit here and there to create and add a bit more mood to this painting. And then I'm also going to go and add another little staircase on the left tree with a little doorway or a little entrance. So using that same brush with white and neon yellow warm, I'm going to create a little archway there that goes slightly pointy and peaked up at the top. I'm going to outline with my black and my blue. And then I'm going to start coming in with the lines for my staircase. I've switched over to my flat brush. It's really important to use a flat brush when you want to create straighter, flatter lines. I scumble out a little bit of the paint off of each step just to give it a little bit more 3D, a 3D look to it. So it kind of looks like it's in the tree, up on or in the branches with a little bit of grass or moss hanging off the side instead of just floating there. And then I'm just going to tap around a little bit of foliage, add a little bit more of the neon yellow warm inside, a few more branches, kind of nestle that in and make it look like there's some leaves coming in front and off to the side. And I'll just finish adding the final touches to this painting. A few more highlights in the water reflecting from the little lights. And I'll add a few more little dots and dabs of lights over on the left side there before I call this one done. This was so much fun to create. I'm happy I got to share it with you guys. Thanks for joining me today. Have a wonderful day, happy painting, and I'll see you soon. Bye!